The next few examples are just more complicated versions of applying that same general strategy for solving equations that we talked about in example 2. We just want to look at problems that have more steps or different steps involved. In example 3, part A, we have 5q minus 6 is equal to 4q. There are a couple different ways we could start this off, but we're going to start by subtracting 5q from both sides to get all of the variable terms on one side of the equation. That will leave us with negative 6 is equal to negative q, or if we want to think of it as negative 1 times q. Then we need to divide both sides to get rid of that coefficient in front of our variable. Which will leave us with positive 6 is equal to q, which is the same thing as writing q is equal to 6. And then of course we should go ahead and check that solution, but I'll leave that to you. In part B, now we have an additional step that we haven't seen in one of these examples so far. We need to apply the distributive property to distribute this negative, or this negative 1, through that set of parentheses. So our first step will be rewriting this as negative b minus 7 is equal to 13. We only have a variable on the left-hand side of the equation, but we need to collect the constant terms on one side of the equation. So we'll add 7 to both sides so that the left-hand side becomes negative b and the right-hand side becomes 20. Now we have that negative sign, or that coefficient of negative 1 in front of b, so again, we'll divide by negative 1, giving us b is equal to negative 20. In part C, we have a distributive property that we need, step that we need to apply again. So our first step will be to take negative 8 times negative 3, which will give us positive 24s. Then we'll take negative 8 times positive 10 to get minus 80, or negative 80, is equal to 16. All of our variable terms are already on one side of the equation, so we just need to move our constant term of negative 80 to the other side by adding 80 to both sides, leaving us with 24s is equal to 96. We have a coefficient being multiplied by our variable, so we'll divide both sides by 24 to get rid of that, leaving us with s is equal to 96 over 24, which reduces to just 4. In part D, again, we're building up to sort of more and more complex problems. We start with negative 7, which initially doesn't have anything that changes with it, but then we'll look at distributing negative 10 through this set of parentheses, which will give us negative 20t plus 90, which is equal to negative 17. Our first step was that distributive step. Now we need to look at still simplifying the left-hand side of the expression by taking negative 7 plus 90. So we'll have negative 20t, and then we'll add those two constant terms together to get plus 83 is equal to negative 17, still on the right-hand side. So for this problem, we needed 2 arithmetic steps, or simplification steps, to get to a point where now we can look at isolating our variable term, which is already on the left-hand side of the equation, and moving our constant terms, or our constant term, over to the right-hand side of the equation by subtracting 83 from both sides, which will leave us with negative 20t is equal to negative 100. And then our last step will be dividing both sides by that coefficient of negative 20, leaving us with t is equal to positive 100 over positive 20, which will reduce to 5, since those two negatives will cancel each other out. In part E, we have a problem that's actually quite similar to part D. The order is just flipped around. We'll still start off with this distributive step. So distributing negative 9 through the set of parentheses will give us negative 108 minus 54a minus 15, which in our first step doesn't change, set equal to negative 15. Now we can look at combining the like terms again on the left-hand side of the equation. So we'll have minus 54a minus 123 equal to negative 15. Our variable terms are already isolated, or I should say all of our variable terms are already on one side of the equation. So we'll move our constant term to the other side by adding 123 to both sides, which will leave us with negative 54a is equal to 108. And then we'll get rid of that coefficient in front of our variable by dividing both sides by negative 54, which will leave us with a is equal to 108 over negative 54, which will reduce to negative 2.